Emily had tried to catch up with Billy Bob, but she couldn't find him in the mass of people moving through the station. So she returned to the Cultural Dance Centre to see if she could warn him before things got started. She saw some fillers standing in the crowd, but didn't see the squad she'd noticed earlier. All sorts of species were here, talking and waiting for the event to begin. She looked around, trying to see where the competitors waited between sets, but she only saw a door at the back that was guarded. Cursing softly under her breath, she looked around to try and find an event organizer, spotting a bent Tyr with a data slate and earpiece.
"I'm looking for my friend. He said he's competing tonight. Can you show me where to go so I can talk to him?"
The bent Tyr just stared at his data slate.
"Sorry, dancers can't be disturbed before the program begins. Each set will come out and dance and return to their chambers if they advance to the next round."
Emily sighed, and then figured all she could do was wait and hope for the best. She pressed through the crowd to find a table near the edge of the dance floor. Most of the crowd was still standing and talking, so she figured she should get a seat early. After a few minutes, the lights dimmed and brightened as the crowd started to find seats or stand around the area. A bent Tyr wearing some sort of strange black and white suit stepped out to the center of the dance floor.
"Esteemed species of all varieties, welcome to tonight's cultural dance tournament. We've got a very impressive selection of dancers tonight, and even one last-minute entry there should prove interesting. For those of you who are attending for the first time, our panel of judges will announce the genre or theme of the song the dance teams must choose, and then in a predetermined order, they'll come out and dance. They're ranked according to skill, difficulty, and flair. And those who continue on to the next round return to their preparation room until the next round. Please, I must ask that you refrain from distracting the dancers. This is a very serious tournament, after all." Applause and cheers are allowed, however. As usual, this music is taken from a rather interesting and barbaric culture that has more variations of music than we've encountered before from such a young species. Please, enjoy yourselves. With that, he walked off the stage as everyone got quiet. She could see the judges sitting on the platform to the side of the dance floor, while everyone who couldn't get a seat stayed close to the edges. Slowly, that strange orb Billy Bob had recognized dropped from the ceiling, spinning around as it began to shine all across the room. There was a moment of surprise before the music began to play, and the announcer came on. "This first number is from a last-minute entry who's never competed before, performing a free choice song. Please give a warm welcome to our first contestant, Billy Bob, Space Trucker." Billy Bob strutted out of the back door and onto the dance floor as the music began. Emily wasn't sure why, but he was wearing a yellow hat that looked rather rigid, and some sort of orange vest over a red shirt. He was wearing those familiar blue jeans, but he also had some sort of belt with strange implements tucked into it. Then the song began. "Young men, there's no need to feel down." He began to stomp, clap, and twist with the song, and over all the crowd began to nod to the beat. But when the song began to chant some sort of chorus, he began to move his arms in time with the music to form symbols that her translator told her matched the start of each letter. The crowd murmured in surprise as he could match up the symbols with the chant so quickly, and began to cheer out. The judges nodded at that, scribbling on their data slates. Emily was watching the fillers in the crowd, however, but she noticed they were nodding and bobbing with the music more than anyone else. This wasn't an ambush. They were simply here to enjoy the music. She let out a heavy sigh of relief and relaxed in her chair, able to just enjoy the music. It was nothing like the stuff Billy Bob listened to when he was driving, but she figured it was some sort of old ritual song of the sort. The song slowly faded away, then, as Billy Bob waved, and the crowd cheered for the first timer. He saw Emily and grinned, quickly moving over to her table. "Not bad, huh?" "Yes, very good, Billy Bob."
They turned then to watch the other dance teams perform their first song. There were no less than 2 fillers teams, each with 5 dancers. One team was clearly better, but both were good. Next was a team of 4 unnits. the insectoids with 4 arms and 4 legs, that Benktirs hired as guards. These seemed to be on break. They performed something called the Hokey Pokey. They looked a bit stiff, but obviously tried their best. Emily was surprised to see a pair of Greslins march out, however, their exosuits decorated in some sort of glowing light display. They normally would never step foot on a black market station, considering their species' strict moral codes. This must be an exception. They started dancing something called the Robot, which Billy Bob muttered was cheating. Near the end of their performance, though, one of the exosuits stopped, and there was a hissing and pop as it malfunctioned. The other Greslin tried to finish the dance alone, but the judges were shaking their heads. It was pretty obvious when the judges announced the Greslins were out that they weren't impressed, so the Greslin dragged the malfunctioning suit off the dance floor, as Billy Bob nodded and headed back to prepare for the next song. The lights came back up then, and the crowd was already talking. Emily heard many of them murmur about how surprised they were that one creature had entered on his own. Could he really expect to perform so many dances as the lead act, and keep impressing people? Emily just smiled behind her mask. They'd certainly get to know Billy Bob and his endurance soon enough. Then the lights dimmed and raised to announce the next challenge was about to begin. We will now witness a series of dances using songs that tell historical tales from the culture's past, the judges announced. The music began, and it was heavy with drums and some sort of instruments that Emily hadn't heard before. Billy Bob emerged from the door wearing a set of black pants, strange boots, a red shirt, and a giant black fuzzy thing on his head she didn't understand. He didn't walk down to the stage, though. Instead, he moved in an odd way, kicking one leg out ahead of the other while keeping his arms crossed. By the time he got to the dance floor, she couldn't believe how low his body seemed as he kicked out his legs in that strange dance. Then the singing finally began. There lived a certain man in Russia long ago. Emily gasped as Billy Bob began to kick out one leg as he tossed his arms out, or was switched between balancing on the toes of either foot as he kicked his other leg out. The balance he was displaying was unheard of among species she knew, not to mention the strength it had to require to support his body on just his toes while squatting like that. That strange chant in the background as he kicked out. Ra, ra, Rasputin. The story had to be some sort of legend. There was no way such a person could survive the things the singers said were being done to him. But then again, humans seemed to be very hard to kill. Maybe this was some sort of inspirational song then, about becoming even harder to kill than normal. Finally, the song ended, as Billy Bob extended a hand up and kicked both legs out at the same time, before bringing them back in and standing up straight. The crowd cheered out, unable to believe what they'd witnessed. Billy Bob was breathing hard, but he was smiling as he stepped over to Emily to watch the other teams. The first Phyllis team came out after him, with some sort of song about a crazy lady named Ma Baker. But Billy Bob frowned as he saw their costumes. The Chicago Cubs? That's a baseball team, you fucking idiots. Shaking his head as they performed an acrobatic, very flexible style of dance that the Fleckers were known for. It lacked the sheer strength and endurance of Billy Bob's crazy leg dance, but it was quite good as well. The next Phyllis team came out with strange hats that seemed rather large and stiff, but not like that one Billy Bob had earlier, and strange blotchy pants and vests. The hell are they trying to be? Cowboys? Jesus, Billy Bob muttered as the song began. This here's a story about Billy Joe and Bobby Sue. Emily looked up at Billy Bob. No relation, but it's also the wrong time period for their song. Seriously. Your people seem to have a lot of songs about robbing people. It's sort of a trend. The Fillers were a little more awkward than the team that came before, but they weren't bad either. After they were finished, the Annets came out, having painted themselves green, but were wearing strange robe-like dresses. She looked at Billy Bob, who shrugged a little. The song began, singing about some sort of terrible creature named Godzilla, as Billy Bob slapped his face with his palm. They think Godzilla was Japanese, so they're wearing kimonos? Jesus Christ. Shaking his head as he watched. They stomped around, seeming to mimic the creature that was being sung about, but it wasn't as impressive as the Phyllis or Billy Bob. Once they were done, the judges conferred and announced the Annets were out. It seemed they'd agreed with Emily's take on the dancing. Now to show these people a real fucking cowboy, Billy Bob muttered, and walked to the back as the lights came on. The Annets chitted happily, as Emily realised the guards were just thrilled they made it to the second round. She giggled a little at the thought they had no idea what they dressed up as and just winged it. Human music was very catchy. It made people want to dance. The crowd was talking, and now most of the buzz was about Billy Bob, which made Emily smile. She had to agree with the murmurs spreading through the club about how it seemed impossible for him to have done that strange leg dance, but now they knew why he'd entered the dance on his own. The fellas could jump around and do acrobatics, but he was able to show extreme balance and endurance all at once. The simplicity of his moves somehow made them more impressive. Soon, the lights flickered and everyone quieted down, as the judge spoke again. For the next set, the contestants had to do some research. They had to pick a song that was more about rural life, or at least involving work or time after work. The song started, and right away a voice rang out. Good time! Billy Bob emerged in a strange outfit. Billy Bob's jeans had returned with some strange pointy boots with intricate carvings, and a jacket that had strange frills on it. He also had one of the hats the Phyllis had before, but his looked much more suited to his head. When he started to dance, she recognised part of it as that strange dance he'd done to intimidate the Phyllis, back on the refueling station. His thumbs tucked into his belt for part of the time, as he stomped and shifted to the beat, twisting and pulling his hands out to clap before tucking them back into his belt. Unlike the look of serious concentration from before, he also had a big grin on his face. This song seemed to be singing about good times after a long week of working, so maybe it held special meaning for him. She had no idea. She was impressed with his ability to keep his dance set on a series of mental lines though, working the same forward and backward, or side to side around the same central position, like some sort of line dance? Near the end of the song though, he pulled a hand from his belt to take his hat off, waving it as he danced with more flourishes to end the song on a high note. Once more, the crowd cheered as he stepped off to the side, looking a little flushed as he was lightly sweating. So many dances back to back were starting to wear on him, but he looked ready for more. He watched the first Phyllis team then come out onto the dance floor wearing jumpsuits which made him frown. Then the song started with a low voice. I want my own TV. He noticed the back of the jumpsuit said moving service and shrugged a little as Money for Nothing started. But when they began to move like they had before, spinning on the ground and demonstrating their ability, he groaned. Breakdancing to Money for Nothing? That's fucking sacrilege. Even if their costume is closer this time. Emily just glanced at the human, grumbling about his competition. When the next song came on, they were wearing white shirts with black stripes, or black shirts with white stripes, and some sort of mask over their faces, holding bags with a strange curvy symbol on the side with a slash in it. Her translator told her it was a sign for money. Bank robbers? Billy Bob muttered, when the song began, as she heard him snort. Bank robbers dancing to money. The singing began and they started to move, but the beat was a little too slow for the Phyllis style of dance. It didn't really fit. Then she remembered Billy Bob had her listen to the song before on that record. Pink Side of the Moon? Either way, she didn't think it really fit what they were trying to do. Indeed, once it was over, the judges stood and announced that team was out. Now it was just Billy Bob and the last Phyllis team. They were staring over at him now, sizing up their final opponent. Billy Bob just grinned back at them and walked to the back to prepare. As the lights came on, the Phyllis team who just lost was arguing among one another over their loss. Was it the song? Or one of the other dancers? None of them agreed on who had messed it up for the others. Emily just giggled and waited. The crowd was all talking about Billy Bob by now, and she wondered how he'd finish up. Soon, the lights flickered and everyone was waiting anxiously. "The last song shall have occult references," said the judge simply, before everyone looked at the door. There was the sound of something creaking, and then footsteps. Billy Bob was slowly walking out towards the dance floor. He was wearing some sort of bright red and black jacket, with red pants, but his face looked different. Green? As if he was dead? He was dragging a foot as he got out onto the dance floor. And then the song began, and he seemed to jump to life. "It's close to midnight." He started to dance with the song, moving in time to the beat, switching between looking stiff and almost dead, to moving with incredible speed and grace. The song was creepy, about some sort of monster or dead thing hunting someone, but his dance seemed to make it seem like he was that creature, about as one who could dance. When the song was over, everyone cheered out, and he smiled, and moved off to the side with a grin. It was just the last fellas team then, and they came out wearing black hoods for some reason. Except for one guy in the back, wearing what looked like American blue jeans. As the music began, the one fellas in the back began to hit a small metal box with a stick. "No, the cowbell?" Billy Bob murmured next to her, as she looked over at him. "All our times have come." It seemed to be a strange song about something called the Reaper, who collected souls. The fellas began a dance that was a bit more human-looking, less acrobatics, and more trying to move with the beat. But the one in the back was just jumping around, smacking that metal bit Billy Bob called a cowbell. Once it was over, the judges were murmuring to each other. Billy Bob was looking up. The fellas were looking up. "Dear species, we have a tie on our hands." There were gasps of surprise, and Billy Bob grunted in annoyance. "However, our rules dictate a tiebreaker be a duet." Everyone looked at Billy Bob, who then pointed at Emily. "I'll use her as my partner, no sweat." Emily blinked in surprise. "What? Excellent. You have 10 minutes to prepare." The fellas rushed backstage, as Billy Bob pulled Emily along with him. "Billy Bob, I'm not a dancer like you." "That's okay, we'll just do the tango." He had her backstage now, and shoved her into his room where his other costumes were strewn out on a table. He began to pull off that red and black thing he had on now, wiping the green makeup off his face. "I don't know how to do that." "It's okay. Like the great Al Pinocchio once said, there's no mistakes in the tango. You just get tangled up and tango on." He was quickly putting his regular clothes back on, including his American flag hat. Then he turned back to her. "Okay, so just step up to me." He held his arms out a bit as she stepped up, but he was reminded that she was taller than him, and his eyes were level with where her collarbone should be. If she has one, but he wasn't sure if she did or not. "Shit, I forgot you're taller than me. That's... Well, I'll get over it. Just take my hands with yours, your top ones. I don't know what you should do with your lower ones. Just something. Anyway, when I whisper, copy, you just do what I'm doing. Keep your feet near mine, I'll take the lead. When I say mirror, you pretend you're my mirror and do what I do, but in the opposite way. Let's try." They tried out for a minute or two as Emily stared mostly at her feet. They moved all right, but she was far from sure about her motions. Inside the room was a buzzer that sounded as he pulled her to the door. "Okay, come on then." She gasped out, entirely not ready, but unable to stop him from dragging her back out to the dance floor. He scrolled through his implant until he found A Fuego Lento. He didn't have much in the way of tango music, but these Xenos had never heard a tango before, so it didn't matter. Once they were on the dance floor, he gripped Emily by one hand and one around her back, only lightly pressing against her wings as he started to dance. so he pretty much stared at her feet, trying to move with him. But even when she was a little slow, he had the strength to easily push her leg back, or pull her with him. She wasn't having the easiest of times with it, but so far Billy Bob was capable enough to keep them moving. At times he would whisper for her to mirror, or copy, and she tried her best to work with the steps he was going through, moving their legs between and around one another. The slower tempo made her feel like she was doing pretty well, but at the end it picked up with more focus, and she had to move quickly. She was getting excited at being in a dance like this. Her life had been all about diplomacy and secrecy, really. She wasn't the kind to be in the spotlight, but here she was out in the middle of the crowd, where everyone was cheering her on. She wasn't flying, but it almost felt like her spirit was. Right up until Billy Bob brought her back to reality. "I'm gonna spin you." Beneath her mask, her eyes went wide, as the human pulled on one of her arms and spun her around. The room blurred, and then he tripped her, and as she fell, he caught her with one arm, raising the other as the crowd cheered. They stepped off to the side as Emily tried to get her bearings back, a little stunned still from what Billy Bob had done. It had been exciting and nerve-wracking and stressful, but also fun. She'd have to see if Billy Bob could teach her how to dance sometime, just for fun. For his part, he had been eyeing the massive trophy to the side of the room. He wanted to win so bad he could taste it. He might have to teach Emily how to dance in case this ever happened again. He needed to be a bit more confident if he was going to secure his victory with better competitors. Then they watched two fillers emerge. One was wearing some sort of giant puffy dress, while the other had some strange suit on. "The fuck?" Billy Bob muttered as the song began. "Well, I'm never ever class high society, God's gift to ballroom notoriety." And they started to dance in a strange, somewhat stiff series of steps, as Billy Bob's jaw dropped. They're ballroom dancing to Big Boss? He was in shock, but Emily didn't understand why he seemed so shocked. It was a song singing about some sort of dance meeting called a ball. She didn't get it. Once the song was over, the crowd cheered as well, since the fellas had done a decent job of it. The judges stood up then, as Billy Bob shook his head. "While we feel the dance itself of Billy Bob and guest was superior, the tie goes to the fillers for having costumes in accordance with the rules." "What? That's bullshit!" Billy Bob was roaring, as the fillers cheered out. Billy Bob stalked forward as Emily groaned. "You didn't say nothing about a tiebreaker. I got costumes for the other sets." The judges stood before the angry human, not seeming worried. "The rules state points will be awarded for keeping costumes according to the song set. Your last piece had no costumes." "Yeah, but I should have won anyway." "Your dances were better, but solo acts also get less." "Such crap! You know what I think of your rules?" he asked, as he crossed his arms. The judges just looked up at him, as he then jumped over their table, making them gasp out, as he grabbed the large golden trophy behind them. It was massive, with several tiers to it. She forgot how strong he was, as he just hoisted it in the air above his head with both hands. "I think I win anyway. Emily, book it." He jumped past the crowd, as people scattered and Annette Gars chased after him. The diplomat blinked and quickly let her wings flap, as she jumped up and began to fly after the human holding the trophy over his head, running and jumping for his ship. And so ends another chapter in the adventure of Billy Bob.